Howdy, I'm William Fitzgerald Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill. I'm here to share what I learned about leadership as a man of the plains during America's expansion to the West, fulfilling manifest destiny, expanding, conquering, and settling America from the Atlantic to the Pacific coast, and how I put those skills to practice in 3 decades of leading my Wild West show. In fact, this simple setting in which I'm appearing reminds me of 3 decades I spent living in a small pavilion on the grounds of my show. I was born February 26, 1846, and passed on January 19, 1917. During my life, America grew economically and in population, with waves of immigrants arriving and moving west as pioneers, needing assistance, providing immense opportunities for me and my fellow frontiersmen. During my youth, my father helped pioneers and settlers find their way, and I inherited that calling into adulthood. During my life, Americans experienced the Civil War, Indian Wars, and achieved the fruits of the Industrial Revolution. During that period, people of the East Coast, where the bulk of the population lived, embraced the frontier as strengthening American identity, democracy, and assimilation of newly arriving immigrants. On the plains, America experienced the loss of a way of life for the Indians of the plains and the near destruction of buffaloes and the settlements that followed Americans' push to the west. That change did not go peacefully. Back on the East Coast and later in Europe, the public thirsted to know what it was like on the frontier. That need was first met through literature in its cheapest and most imaginative form, through hugely popular dime novels which heavily featured me. That interest turned to enactment of stories about the frontier on the stage, on which I appeared. However, that wasn't enough. The public wanted more, a more physical experience about the West. I and others provided that experience through open-air Wild West shows, which gave millions the sights, sounds, characters, animals, and acted-out scenes which we selected from the frontier. Conflict between Indians, cowboys, and cavalry, horses, buffaloes, stagecoaches, marksmanship exhibitions, and so much more. Of course, when it came to battles, Indians were aggressors and losers, with the exception of the Battle of Little Bighorn, where Custer's last stand was fought. But that was followed by reenactment of my role in getting the first scalp for Custer. More on that later. The public absorbed and accepted what we presented in our Wild West shows as their vision of the frontier. That vision persisted in the media and the public well into the 20th century. I helped create that vision. It made millions for the Wild West shows and for me. However, as you will learn later, I did not hold on to my millions. I wrote, and much was penned in my name. 2 years before I died, I starred as a scout in what was that time was a new media, motion pictures. The movie was called Indian Wars, which premiered in 2 cities, but was canned by the authorities as presenting too favorable an image of the Indians. It was a very difficult time for Native Americans, who by that time had been herded onto reservations. Today, only a few minutes of Indian Wars exists. A lot has been written about me, and I have a center and museum named after me in Cody, Wyoming. However, very little and nothing in specific about my leadership. I have my detractors. And I have to admit that despite or perhaps because of the fame I attained, I had my flaws, infidelity, and drank too much, and according to some, I suffered from insanity, becoming my mythical character. Further, my detractors claim I was just a frontman for my publicist, while others, who worked for me, later claimed it was their leadership responsible for our success. I am not deterred by my detractors, past or present. By participating in this series, I want you to be the judge whether what I share is of assistance to you in meeting your aspirations. I will be watching. I've divided this series about my life into phases. These are my youth, my years as a scout, my days on stage, my Wild West show days, and long fade into the shadows. For me, my youth covered the first 11 years of my life, with my family moving to and living on the frontier. I was born in Iowa, lived in Toronto for a few years. Then we moved to Kansas, while my childhood abruptly ended with the death of my father at age 11. During this period, I learned many skills, including the use of a rifle, horsemanship, interacting with people, be they settlers or Indians, and hostiles, both Indians and fellow settlers. As for my scouting days, I will share my experiences and adventures. I will discuss the friends and contacts I made, like Wild Bill Hickok and the cavalry, journalists and writers who wrote about me, who formed my network, essential to my success. The lessons learned about leadership as a scout, setting the table for others to meet their objectives, settlers or those building the railroad, or the cavalry tasked with taming the West. Then I will discuss my on-stage days, where I learned that being myself was of more value than trying to master a script. From there, we'll move to my leadership and my role in my Wild Wild West show, which ran for decades in America and Europe, testing my existing leadership skills and requiring me to master new ones. There, I mastered meeting the expectations of audiences, the use of publicity, of logistics, and managing a diverse cast of plainsmen, cowboys, Indians, and later an international cast. I learned how to make money. However, investing I earned eluded me, and by the end of my life, my family wondered how they were going to pay for my funeral. Notwithstanding, I had a grand funeral, but there is some controversy over where I was buried. I'll end with my long fade, during which I had many goodbye performances and living through the transition from Wild West shows to movies and the impact I had on America's perception of the West. I'm proud that during my life I never lost my self-awareness of being a man of the West, where I found and maintained my roots, where I found peace, even in the darkest times. So I hope you will join me in this journey through my life and what I learned about leadership in this series, and that it proves useful to your own. Until next time, I wish you happy trails.